once every 7, 8, or 6 years, I guess, depending upon leap year. Isn't that how that works? It's never just a 7-year kind of a process. But it's great to be here this morning. I'm glad that you guys were able to come out this morning and to kind of be a part of our class this morning and worship to follow. I'm not quite sure if Andrew's going to be leading singing, if Matt's going to be leading singing, or if I'm going to be leading singing, but one of the three of us will be leading singing. So I think Andrew texted last night late and his voice was a little bit scratchy, but we'll get, that's an hour away. Plenty of time to figure that out, so plenty of time. I have an announcement sheet here this morning. Oh, it's on the back of my thing right here. But today, again, we'll have our class this morning in worship at 10 a.m., Wednesday night, just no meeting tonight on the 28th, so no meeting this evening in the building. But then on the 28th, this Wednesday, we're going to be at the Center Street Church of Christ, starting at 7 p.m. So it'll be this Wednesday, no worship here or Bible study here. It'll be all at the Center Street Church of Christ of our citywide worship. Our youth group have a lock-in coming up this Friday and Saturday, so that they can actually be awake on Sunday, which is a nice touch. We'll return to our normal schedule next Sunday, January the 1st, with classes and worship, and then also a 5 p.m. service. Monday, our offices will be closed on the 2nd of January, and then we'll move into our new year. I want to extend our deepest sympathy again to the Don Miller and his family at the passing of his wife, Kathy, on Monday, December the 12th. She was the mother of Dawn Miller Dixon and a friend of many of our church family members. A celebration of life was held on the 19th of December. And again, our continued thoughts and prayers towards those who have lost loved ones this last year. Houston kind of pointed out last week that over 44 families have lost loved ones this year. That's quite a bit of our body. So continue to know that holiday times are a very difficult time whenever you've lost loved ones, because family, if anything, holidays do circle around family, your thoughts of family, and all types of things. A Christmas song just popped in my head, sugar plums. I don't even know if I've had sugar plums before. So, but I do want to kind of exciting this morning. We can be together, and holidays means a lot of you guys travel throughout the year. Maybe not this morning so much, just traveling here. But travel sometimes is what I was used to, and now that Mom and Dad are here, we don't travel as much for the holidays, because every year it was, whenever you were younger, you went away every single year if you were from out of town, and I've been out of town for a long time until now. I guess now I'm in town. But travel does something to me, so a little inside of my brain, so brace yourself, because it's kind of scary inside the brains of other people. And some of you will relate to this, and some of this it'll make you very happy. But travel means driving, and driving means I see farmland. And whenever I go on long trips, I have this idea of wanting to be a farmer, believe it or not. I don't know, I just look out in the country, you can plow, you can grow things, live off the grid, if that's even possible as a farmer. I think it might be a little bit there. But I just have this idea that I would love to have that as a job when I forget about the job that I currently have, which is also a definition of a good break, when you kind of forget that you have a job, by the way. So farming, and so then I start thinking about the farming, because I got to think about something. Or are anybody a sleeper when they drive, or doze, or drift? One of the best inventions on the road is the rumble strips on the side. And my challenge that I don't know if I've ever done is not hit a rumble strip on a long trip. I don't think that's ever happened. I'll drift, so I'll think about things. And so I'll walk this little farming thought along the way. And I say, okay, I got to sell everything to be, because I can't have two houses. So I got to sell everything that I have now and move out there to the farm in this make-believe land that I have envisioned. And so I slowly start to think, I don't think I could do that. It's not just the glamorous plowing the fields. There's a lot of other things, like repairing the tractor that when it breaks, or I've heard of repairing the baler when it goes, and that's, I guess, a really big thing. And you got to bale hay, and so then you got to take care of the cat. And then I hear about this 4 a.m. wake-up call about going and taking care of animals. And then when one gets in duress, I'm like, well, I guess they're going to be in duress. But that's not the farming mentality. That means you go save that day, and it's like you're a superhero every single day as a farmer. And I slowly then pull in to where my destination is, and that little fleeting thing of wanting to be a farmer goes away, because the niceties of not waking up at 4, being able to go into the fridge and get the eggs instead of having to go to another place to get the eggs and such and so forth. But I do have that, and I've had that more than once, but I've never followed through on it. But it does sound like it's something that I think is kind of cool. So we do mini farming at our house, right? So we all have who has a garden in their backyard? The mini farmers here. Mini farmers. Anybody have fruit trees in the backyard? Okay, all right. So we have a fruit tree. We've had a garden on and off, and it is a good thing that I'm not a farmer because I don't really tend too much to that. I have ideas. All you got to do is water it every day. You just got to go out there, water it, or you got to spray some stuff or pick off these things, but it never seems to happen. And so we have a tree that we planted. Okay, just put a tree out there. So it's a peach tree. And for the first several years of the peach tree's existence, it did nothing. It would like bloom, and then it would do nothing because frost would come along. And then one year we've got a ton of peaches on the tree, and it was the year of the Japanese beetle that came by. And that just turned everything. They ate, I mean, they are just really hungry in little things. And so they just ate everything and destroyed all the peaches. And so then you got to pick up the peaches because of the mush down below. So, so finally last year, I'm like, can we just cut this down, man? And it's just, we're not having any kind of luck. They had one time, when they got really a ton of peaches, but then they never ripened, and they were just hard as a rock the whole year. And so so we're like, cut it down. So we're like, okay, how do we cut it down without having to get, a stump grinder, dig around it, cut it with a chainsaw, and then fill the hole back in and call it good, right? And so that was going to be the plan this summer. And then they started growing peaches, considerable amounts of peaches again. I'm like, okay, interesting. And I'm like, they're never going to ripen. They never have ripened. She goes out to visit her parents with the boys, and I'm on the phone out there and looking at the dogs, and it's in August. And I look over at the tree, and lo and behold, I see the little redness in the peach. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way that there's a ripe peach. I go out there and squeeze it, and it's actually not like a rock. And I'm thinking, geez. So what do? Pick it off and eat it, right? It was wonderful, and it was a wonderful peach. It was just juicy and everything. And so, of course, we harvested them 2 weeks later, which is not a good idea because other little insects like ripe items. And so we lost about 200 peaches, ended up with 50 that we kept, and but I'm back in the phase now of let's cut it down. So hopefully that won't happen, but a lot of work comes into play in growing that tree from the seed to that tree, and then needs the right kind of weather, and it needs, I guess, bees to do something to it and that kind of stuff. And I never really studied that much in college. I don't even think I ever took biology. Are we really online, Les? Is that right? Okay, I'll watch my stories. Education is very important. So learn all of this, those tree things. But yeah, I definitely don't know exactly what it takes to grow peaches. The garden is a good weed grower at times. That happens from year to year. So not much of a farmer, and I know that it's probably not because of lack of want, but lack of the doing part. So our goals today are going to revolve a little bit around this tree of fruit and some other things. And so I have 3 goals for us today. So we're going to look at a parable. We're going to look at Luke 10. This is the Good Samaritan parable. And I want to bring some supporting scriptures to this passage that Jesus talked about. And why is this easy or hard to accomplish? So that's the goal, the 3 goals for this morning, and hopefully we can do that. If it spills over into next week, then we'll spill it over into next week, but I think I have another parable for next week. But this right here is something I think that we all can do some things. This is a lesson really for myself also, so this is one that we sharpen each other with, because there are some takeaways to accomplish this question that a person asked Jesus, what must I do? And so with travel, we talked about travel, how I want to be a farmer, but with travel, I also do some conferences with my job, and so I get to go to different conferences and hear some speakers, hear some wonderful speakers, hear some speakers who are just starting to be speakers, and so I get there and I sit down, and I'm like, okay, am I going to get my note machine out to take notes from the speaker? I'm thinking, okay. And the speaker, Houston Kraft is their name, and they start talking about kindness. And he starts talking more about kindness. And he gets me. and it starts hitting. And if you've ever been in a lesson, in a sermon, in a conference where a speaker goes and all of a sudden you get to what I call free think and your mind just starts popping with ideas and you start writing things down, you start connecting with the speaker and things start happening. And so that's what happened, and his topic was simply about kindness. And I have been since November thinking about how I can work in kindness into almost anything that I do, because I think it's a way out for a lot of the things that we're struggling through right now in society, in our community. And I think that kindness is something that we maybe don't talk enough about and we may not take serious enough consideration with. So, ready for a survey? This is not a raise your hand survey because it's going to be about yourself, and then it's going to get a little bit more intense. So, how kind do you think you are? How kind do you think you are? And rating from 1 to 10, of course. So think of that number. How kind do you think that you are? You got that number? The next question is not the fun one. How kind do you think others think you are? How kind do you think? Now, let's define others. Now, who can others be? Because it depends, right? So others could be your family, could be your friends, could be your coworkers, who also could be friends, could be your neighbors, could be groups that you hang out with. Say you have a hobby that you kind of do that. But how kind do you think they think that you are? And so I want to turn it over to you because I think that we're clumped up pretty good with great attendance, by the way. So I'm going to give you a question that you're going to share with your neighbor and just a little bit of time here about kindness. And so I want you to define kindness, okay? So in your row, in your person that you're sitting next to, define the word kindness. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute. So take a second there, talk to your neighbor. What kindness is. Define kindness. One of the things that I'm going to try to do this morning and next week is to try to make this a little bit more social for you guys. I know that we do open response things, so we're going to open that up here for the defining of kindness, but also I'm going to turn it over to you guys to kind of visit with your neighbor, because sometimes I sit in the back and I sit over in the side and I have this impulse to want to answer, but I don't exactly always know if it's the right thing that the speaker's looking for. And then there's a little frustration, and then you're like, okay, then your heart rate goes up and all that kind of stuff. So if you can kind of vet out what you want to do with your neighbor and say with your neighbor, then hopefully you can bring that out to the class. So let's give me some definitions of kindness. And there's no really wrong, I mean, there's probably some wrong answers for kindness, but for the most part, I don't think there's really a wrong answer for kindness. Anybody have an idea that they want to share about kindness?
Treat others as you'd like to be treated.
Treat others as you'd like to be treated. Excellent. Thank you. Good.
I think in your relationship with other people, it's kind of like a soothing ointment.
Nice. Yes, and yeah, my son burned his hand last night, and we were looking for that soothing ointment. Yeah, so that's actually a healing kind of a thing, kindness, which is really awesome. Good. One more from this side. Yes?
After an interaction, the person feels better one way or the other after interacting.
Okay, so he said after the interaction, the other person feels better, and probably both people feel better in that thing. So there's a reaction to that kind of a carry-away thing. That's excellent. Good. What about over here?
Putting others before yourself.
Putting others before yourself. Excellent.
An action that makes the person feel appreciated and valued.
Okay, and you get a residual piece of that appreciation piece, and they feel a value by the showing of appreciation. That's wonderful. Good. One more.
Not just a word, something we do.
All right, not just a word, something we do. So there's an action. So there's many words that can describe kindness. And I'm going to come up with some lists here of the supporting scriptures, and kind may fall in some of those things. I'll give the example of love. And so love is it's a word that can mean a ton of things. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But kindness, so you bring up something, and I put it into two categories. So listening to Houston Kraft speak, he broke the word kind into a couple different categories. And he had these two different categories. He had nice and kind. And he opposed those to each other. And a lot of times you can confuse the two. And he is going for a different, not such a nice kindness, like the niceties. And so he went a little bit further there and talks about how the nice part, that this right here is more of like a reaction to something. And this is something that is a little bit, when you're looking into some things, it's conditional upon something. Okay, so reaction or conditional. You hold the door open for somebody because they're walking up. You say thank you because they did something. It's very nice, and it is also kind to do those things, and it does leave some people with appreciation. It gives them value for opening the door or whatever it may be, or service of some sort there. And then the other part of kind is a proactive type, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So you take a little bit, you've got to have some proaction here to get things going. And then this is something here that you do that is unconditional. And you can start seeing, and you can split up that part by many different ways, but this is a starting point to where you can kind of start thinking, is this more of what he called a confetti type of kind, that confetti just goes everywhere, or is this a deep, courageous, contagious type of kind? And so he wanted to speak about that deep, courageous, and contagious type of kind that is something that spreads, and it is not something that's light, that's something that does promote some actions. And so those type of things, they resonate with me because I deal with kids every day, and I see acts of kindness every day. I see acts of unkindness every day, and that's one of the things in the training ground with 10, 11, 12-year-olds that you've constantly got to kind of help with them and say, you know, that was unkind, and they're like, they know, but it's normally a reaction. They have an unnice reaction to a situation to them, and they react to it. And so my idea here is I've got to somehow say to the kids, someone's got to stop the back and forth. Someone's got to take that step and say, you know what, now we're done, and not come back with an unkind action. So moving forward, what must I do? If you've not turned to Luke 10, let's take a look, and let's take a look at this Good Samaritan. What must I do? And it starts in verse 25, Luke chapter 10. It says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law, he replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Kind of something like what we just kind of heard about on defining of kindness right here. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to a place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where a man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to the inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers, he asked. The expert of the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And I know mercy is not the same word as kind, but you can see the kindness that was shown to him that day. And then a continued kindness, one that had actions that moved forward. So why did that parable come to mind? Well, I have a reason for that, but I'd like to ask you first an interesting little piece about the neighbor aspect. The last part of where he talked about the love the Lord your God, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. I want you to share with your people that are around you again what or who your neighbor is now. I think it's changed over time. So what is a neighbor? Who is a neighbor? So talk to your people, your neighbors by you. on who a neighbor. So define the word neighbor with your friends around you, please. What are some definitions of neighbor that you guys have? Definitions of neighbor.
Anyone you encounter.
Anyone you encounter. Okay, good. People you can trust. Good, nice. Okay, a close, right? So a distance kind of a thing. Has the depth, yeah, someone you can interact with. And that is an interesting thought. So someone you can interact with, and you don't even have to be close to people to interact with them nowadays, can you? Yeah, not physically. Has the definition of neighbor, in your opinion, changed over the years? I mean, I'm entering into the category of the older person, that kind of a thing. And so I talk to kids, and I'm like 4 to 5 times their age. And I say that to them, and it's pretty astounding, actually, the feeling of it. But they look at it like, you're not that old. I'm like, I am that old. And so it's like the way back days. But neighbor is not a word that's used very often anymore. Has the definition of neighbor changed? And even more importantly, there's a reason why. So why has the definition of neighbor changed? And so, I mean, we go back, I think one of the classic definitions of a neighbor is the neighbor that you are on the same telephone line with on the party lines, right? And so that's a whole different level of neighbor, because if you are sharing a party line and you pick up the phone and someone's on there, are you going to do the neighborly thing? You know, that kind of a thing. I can't even imagine if the telephone, I don't know if I've had I don't know. I mean, telephone conversations, I mean, I think people would get bored if they listen to mine. But I think that telephone conversations have really decreased quite a bit in the last 10 years. But that neighbor, you had to say, okay, that neighbor, if you then picked up the phone and they were on there, you had a privacy action of kindness that you had to show. Like, oh, so they hear you pick up, you hear the click, and then they want to hear, you know, there may be a pause, and they want to hear the what? The click of you hanging up. And so you want to hang up loudly so they can you don't want to, oh, sorry. You know, you want to make sure they know you're getting off the line, kind of a thing. And so I think that's one of the things. The geographically located, the neighbors next door. We associate with the neighbors next door? I think people move a lot more nowadays than what they used to. And that could be just a perspective that I have, but with people moving all the time, with jobs relocating, I know that when I lived in Cabot, we lived outside of Little Rock Air Force Base, and our families were turning over all the time because in the Air Force, you're moving base to base. And so that movement seems to also limit a little bit some of your interactions. Joe? Yes. And so he's talking about the privacy fences, that the way that we kind of fence in our areas now is different from the chain link. We hardly ever see a chain link fence in the cities now, and some of them I think are not even legal or by covenants of some sort there. So privacy fences, so you can go out in the backyard and no longer see somebody. When we first moved in, it was one of the first things we put up. It wasn't necessarily to keep them out, but we had dogs, and we didn't want the dogs I didn't want to like sit out there with a leash all the time holding on to the dogs. And so the dogs could then run free in the yard, but chain link fence could have done that so much better, or a shorter fence, but everything is now 6 foot, and not many people can see over. Wasn't there a television show where a guy and another guy would talk over the fence? You remember that back in I think probably the 90s? Was it called Tool Time? What's it called? Home Improvement, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was the show, was Tool Time, yeah. the fictional show. But yeah, Home Improvement. So he would talk to his neighbor over that fence that Joe's referring to, and never even saw their face, I don't think, that kind of thing. So it's just an interesting thing on how we define neighbors. And so either way, how you define a neighbor, we're supposed to love our neighbor and then take care of. So the example that Jesus gives, what about these three? We have a priest, we have a Levite, and we have a Samaritan. Okay? Talk to your neighbor the difference about the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan. And what I'm looking for is basically some definitions of who they would be and how they would be viewed in society, in the community. Going from Jerusalem to Jericho, it's about a 15-mile trek. It descends about 3,000 feet, so they're going downhill. Hopefully they hadn't already gone uphill on the same day. So this person going downhill, it's a curvy road, I guess, from what I can read. And so this was not necessarily the safest of roads, but we've got a priest on his way to Jericho, a Levite on their way to Jericho, and a Samaritan on their way to Jericho. Define those three people and what you know about a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan with your neighbor. Any ideas that you came up with for a priest? How could you define a priest? When you say it again?
Descendant of Aaron.
Okay, descendant of Aaron. Okay, high priest knows the law most likely too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, descendant of Aaron knows the law. At least you would assume they would, right? What about the Levite? Served in the temple, knows rituals, knows customs, traditions, good. And what about a Samaritan? A nobody? Yeah. A lowest person, like a tough person, right? I mean, it's like almost like I don't fit in.
Mixed race.
Yeah.
No respect.
Yeah, no respect. So I mean, and then we know the story. We know who serves. We know who shows the mercy. And in the story, did you catch again how they crossed? You know, sometimes you're thinking maybe they missed them. Maybe they didn't see the person. And then you see them, they passed on the other side. Almost like they went around it. Now, what could be some reasons that a priest or a Levite maybe wanted to pass and had to get to a place? Almost like you got to lay for church. Got to get there. And I got 15 miles to go. Doesn't say what part, but I got to get there, right? Didn't want to be unclean, okay? There's some issues that come with that. Good. What's another reason? Okay, afraid. I mean, this is a medical situation, right? This isn't one of those things, hey, did you fall down? Let me help you get up. This is a medical situation where they don't know what they're about to get into. And they also say, once you start it, you got to finish helping the person, which the Samaritan did.
It could have been a trap, too, because it's sort of a road of robbers, right?
Could have been a trap, he said, as Anthony says. And so the idea of, okay, we got this person, maybe it's all fake, and so they want to go after somebody else, rob somebody else. So I think we sell them short pretty quick, because the Samaritan makes them look, I mean, it's like the great ending. So much so it's an idiom in our society today, to where the Good Samaritan is actually a Good Samaritan law that's out there, that you can provide help to other people the best you can and help them through and not fear certain things. Now, if you know better to have higher training, then it's a different thing. But if you are just a person trying to help someone, that Good Samaritan law gives you some protection because it is the right thing to do to that neighbor. So where have we been? Talked about peach trees this morning, right? Are you still wondering how the peach tree relates? Anybody? Oh, I'm going to get that for you. All right, so we got Peachtree, talked about kindness. I went to a conference, which is great, and then launched us into the Good Samaritan, which is really strange here. So let's take a look at some supporting scriptures of this right here. And the first one that I would like to go to are the fruits of the Spirit found in Galatians, chapter 5, 22. And I'm just going to, I listed some of these things, so we're going to look at three things. The fruits of the Spirit, when Paul talks in Colossians about clothing yourselves. So we're in Galatians 5:22 and the fruits of the Spirit, and list these out here with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness. Not gentle, that's funny. That's coming over here. Goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So the fruits of the Spirit, 9 things that are listed there. Preceding that were non-fruits of the Spirit, if you want to get into those, and the list is longer of the non-fruits of the Spirit there, of those things that lead to death and lead to other issues. But 9 fruits of the Spirit. I want to look over in Colossians 3, verse 12. Colossians 3, verse 12, where it talks about clothing yourselves and gives some things to clothe yourselves with. It says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, forgiving one another, and also love, tying those all together and bonding those all together. And then it took my mind over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting in verse 4, where love is just dissected all over the place. And this is probably one of the most famous passages that you guys all know about with love, even though these 3 are pretty well known. But love is patient, kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, not easily angered, no record of wrongs, rejoices with truth, protects, trusts, hopes, and preserves. So lots of things here. How does the peach tree go into this for me? The peach tree goes into this to me is that I read these I guess heard these for probably 45 years, 40 years of my life. We know these things. We almost, if it came down to it, we probably could list the fruits of the Spirit and come real close. Clothing ourselves, we could probably get the Colossians, the love is chapter, we probably could get most of those if pressed into those areas. But how does the tree come into this in my mind? Well, the tree is a growth thing. And I think that one of the things that I always think about is whenever I read these scriptures, like you have to have joy. You have to have kindness. You have to be gentle. You have to be, and it's almost like I always think of that as a fully matured version of joy or kindness or patience. But yet nothing is like that. Everything grows in that direction. The tree, and it bears fruit. And I think looking at these scriptures here, looking at kindness in a way that I can continually grow and mature, and then also have action, put something that is more proactive and unconditional into place, takes time to do that. Young kids don't come in as young kids, they don't play kind. Very few do they come over and share. They're taught that. Very few of the kids, they grab onto what's theirs and they don't think anything of it. But then when someone tries to take it, there's an interesting thing that happens, and we have to start being part of a community, and we get to know our neighbor for the first time, which is interesting. And that takes different actions and different rules come into play. But of these 3 groups, the 2 things that, at least by the translations, are the same, are patience and kindness. And I think those are heavily related to each other. So related that in 1973, they did a study, and these 2 people did the study out of Princeton at their seminary school, and they looked at this from Jerusalem to Jericho was their study. And so they have a bunch of people that are in seminary college going to be ministers, going to be part of the work, and they reach out. They don't have email in 1973. They don't have texting, so they probably, to advertise this, announce it in their classes or put up a good old-fashioned bulletin board, a piece of paper. If you're interested, call here, rip a little paper on the bottom kind of a thing. And so then they called that. They ended up getting 67 people interested in being part of this study. And this study, then they started talking to them, and then at the end of that, 47 of them agreed over the phone. It specifies that, strangely enough, that they would be part of the study. They'd get paid, I think it was, they get paid a little bit of money, not much, to be a part of this. And so then of the 47 remaining, 40 actually didn't break the rules or do something outside of the standard norms for this study to happen. And here's what they did. They brought in those people going to be part of the vocation of ministry in some sort. And they said, we would like you to talk and give a 3 to 5 minute presentation on either something that you would do as a vocation, not in the ministry, or 2, something that is about this Good Samaritan and this Luke chapter 10. So they read the Luke chapter 10, they gave them this study, and they read through the Good Samaritan. And they said, okay, we would like you to do this. We'll keep you over here, and we'll let you guys study and prepare for this. And then we'll call you one at a time, and we'll have you guys go to a different building to present your 3 to 5 minute presentation. They either could do, again, a presentation on a vocation, a job outside of ministry, or talk about this Good Samaritan and doing service to others. Kind of related, but not, they have a choice. It wasn't required for them to do that. So then when they got there, they had them over a 3-day period in December, a little bit colder, I would say. So they get over there, and they have them all in the room, and then they do something at the last minute to them. And they put a hurried or an immediacy to each of the people different. So there is a very hurried state where they call the person up and they said, hey, holy cow, we're running behind. We called your name. You didn't hear our name, but you got to get across campus. And they put a distance for them to travel. They used the phrase, you're late. They were expecting you a few minutes ago. You got to hustle up, get over there. Then they would go across campus from one building to another. Then they did an intermediate hurriness. And so they said, hey, they're ready for you. Go ahead, be right there. I think you'll be right on time. You got no time to spare, though. You got to hustle up. And then the last one, they said, hey, we're looking plenty of time. Just go ahead. You got to go to this building over here, building B. Take your time, no problem. What do you think they put on the way from building A to building B? They pulled a person in the way in a door frame that they had to go by that had his head slumped over, that he was making audible sounds of pain, and they wanted to see if they would actually try to help them. Okay, now, so set that up there. They all read them this scripture here. They read every single one of this. They gave them a copy of that. They actually simulate this, and I wonder how many of those people helped that person or even offered help. They got into some ratings of where the level of help, like a 0 was right on past, didn't say anything. A 1 was like looking at them and acknowledging them. A 2 was saying something to them. A 3, 4, 5, that kind of thing. And then a 6 was actually taking, some of them actually took that person outside, got them some fresh air, got them something to drink, and actually kind of tended to them, even though they were about to give a presentation, right? So what percent was the highest? What percent was the lowest? Well, I think it would be easiest to think that the lowest person that was going to help would be that person that was in the most rush, correct? The highest hurry. And only 10% of the people who were giving that talk in a rushed, very fast state of a hurriedness there helped that person. So 90% went right on past. Some didn't say anything and stepped over the person. And then in the intermediate, 45%. So almost half of the people who were almost not necessarily in a rush, but I have this much time. Maybe if I ran after I helped the person, maybe I could help them out. And then of the people who had a little bit extra time, 63% of those people did. So what does that tell you about helping? Oh, there's one other thing. Of the people that actually, remember you had a choice between vocation of what you were going to do in the ministry, not in the ministry, or you could give a talk, a message on the Good Samaritan. Of the people that gave a talk on the Good Samaritan, only 53% helped the person on their way to giving the talk about the Good Samaritan, which is interesting. So it's a very strange thing. So what does it tell me? It tells me that patience and kindness are very related to each other. And I think that on the road from Jericho here, on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, I don't think they had a rush hour traffic on that road like we have nowadays. They didn't have the 5 o'clock traffic. They were just walking. But they did have some time. They didn't have these little things here or these little things in our pockets here to tell time. They had the sun. They had some ideas of exactly when it was, right? But how much of our hurried state, much like this study, gets in the way of us being fruits of the Spirit, being kind to other people. So let's take a look at what we talked about today so far. We've looked at the parable. I hope that we can make some connections here pretty quickly here. The second thing is to bring some supporting scriptures. We looked at 3 different supporting scriptures of talking about the fruits of the Spirit, the things that we can clothe ourselves in, and then also what love is. And then lastly, here it is, why is this easy or hard for some people to do? And I want to focus in on kindness. We've looked at kindness the most today. Why is it easier or harder for some people? They did in this study talk about they wanted to get into personality traits and character traits, and that was hard to do. But I think that may not be the best thing for us to look at. Well, I'm not a real kind person, therefore I don't have to be kind. I don't know if that's something that we really want to charge ourselves with, but I do think that our hurried state, me included, our hurried state gets in the way of us being fruitful towards God. And I think that we know that, but what do we do about it? Do we plan ahead to get to where we need to be so that we can not necessarily just be early or be on time, but actually do God's work in a way? Think about your definition of kindness. You talk to your neighbor about the definition of kindness. Think about the time it takes to be kind. If you're just going around shaking hands, if you're going and saying hello to somebody, or if you're going to somebody's house to deliver something, or if you're going to go it's easy to take up a garbage can for somebody because you know they're not going to be out there, and that's an inanimate object. Is it a kind act? Absolutely. Is it proactive? Absolutely. Is it unconditional? Sure. But you have a time that you're like, I've got 30 seconds, I can pull that up there. Other acts of kindness take much, much longer. Think of the time that it took him to put the oil, took the man, put him on his donkey, put oil, tended him, found a place for him to go, and then gave money to take care of them and said, hey, I'll come back and make this right if it goes over this 2 silver coins or 2 denarii. Kindness and patience go hand in hand. And I want to put that on your hearts this week because I think that there's a lot of times that we have that we can be used and to live out the fruits of the Spirit, these clothings that he talks about, and then also this love. But it takes a lot of time to do that. Start small. Think about the tree. If you're going to grow in this area, you can't just grow and bear fruit, 300 peaches on the tree at the same time. But you can get there over time, and you can get there with a purposeful peace. I think that our rushing leads to less opportunities. And it's something us as Christians that we need to really take because people notice these 2 things. They'll take either one today. When we're talking about deep kindness here, it's a whole different level that I think that Christians can really specialize in and work at. You have a choice every day to see other people if you get out. If you're ill, you don't see many people. It's just like you're just trying to get through the day. But if you get out and you see other people, there's an opportunity. People that you come in contact with, to make a difference, to make eye contact, to put value, to show that you see them. You can even choose to interact in them. You can plan ahead to interact with them in a way that you can kind of control and do something about. Or you can pass on the other side. Sometimes it's and you know whenever you do pass on the other side. There's times that happens, and you have to ask yourself, I'm too late, I can't even get into this right now. And so think about your time, because that's all we have is time, and how that relates to your kindness and the way that you can live those things out. And I pray that you guys can think, as well as myself, pray about ways of seeing these opportunities, being aware of them, and having the time to act on them. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the word that you've given us here. We're grateful for the parables that your Son spoke. Grateful for the application that we have to our lives. Grateful how it makes us look at the things that we do and compare them to what Christ wants us to be. I pray that you help us this week to look, to be ready and to be willing in these opportunities, to look at the way that we treat time in our lives, and then also look for ways that we can be have the fruits of the Spirit shown to others that we come in contact with, Help us to find that happen to us as well and to be thankful for those things that happen. Pray that you help be with many, many families today as they're celebrating a lot of family time. Pray for many people who are traveling, who had delayed travels, people who are under the weather. Pray for those families that they can contact each other, and then also just make a phone call, a FaceTime, or something that they can do to connect and keep those fantastic family bonds together. Pray that you be with us through our worship this morning. Pray with us as we fellowship and show kindness to each other, as we talk and get to know each other and continue to get to know each other here in our body of believers here at Mount Comfort. Through your Son's name we pray. Amen.